Auzubillahi Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome again to another webinar. Um, as we normally start, we start with a verse of the Quran. Um, as the topic today, as I know many of you would be turning in, is about children and parenting. I thought that this verse from chapter 31, where Luqman alayhi salam is speaking to his son, um, is has a lot of wisdom. And in this verse, as we read, Ya bunayya ukum as-salat wa amr bil ma'ruf wa nahu anil munkar. O my son, establish prayer, akim as-salat, wa amr bil ma'ruf, enjoin what is right, forbid what is wrong, wa nahu anil munkar. Asfaru alama asba'ak. And I love this because it says, be patient on whatever it might be that is befalling you. In nazalak min azmil amur, that there is wisdom. There is when Allah talks about amr, or He talks about azmil amur, that this matter is something which, um, like we have a understanding that even not a leaf falls down, that Allah has understanding and there's purpose and there's design to it. And uh, we have this advice, which is in other verses, which is sabr and salah, other verses of the Quran where you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about salah, which is essentially praying to Allah, having that concept of God centricity, going back to Him, knowing that there is beauty in sabr, in endurance. And what it makes Islam different from other faiths. Like there might be other faiths which say religion is all about love. And I tell our parents, yes, religion is all about love, and a lot of the times, 95% of what we need to do is love with our children. But there is 5% where if I really love someone, I have to tell them at times, things where are not good for them. A lot of people come to me and they say, Ali, I only knew my friends when the friends who disagreed with me and said, no, I don't think you should be doing that. I think you should be doing this. And I'm telling this because I love you, not because I want to control you. So the concept of nahi and al munkar, as we have it in our religion, and the wisdom of when to apply that, I think is really really important. Kind of to understand when it is that we need to do that. So. Um, Yes, and there's a lot of ahadith about Luqman and his son, and a lot of wisdom there for those who are interested. Um, and as it's the topic of parenting, we do have a parent circle. So if you're a parent joining this and you have a child which is struggling in sexuality or gender, we do actually have um, a parent circle on Mondays, just after our men's circle, on 7 till 8:30. After 9 p.m. I have a parent circle, and I'm sure some of those parents are on the call as I see now from our parent support group. Um, Also, if you're joining us for the first time and you don't know who we are, we're a peer support organization for Muslims who struggle with sexual or gender identity. We have a free consultation service where you're a parent, you're somebody who's struggling with sexual or gender identity, or you know of someone, or you're just kind of looking for help in this space, and there's a free consultation which is kind of there. I also I'm a therapist as well as a coach, and I offer sessions as well on a one-to-one basis. Um, And we try to do outreach as an organization, as in we've done events for mosques, or our main theme is online. Like the webinar that you see here is completely free. It's completely, we do it because there, as you know, there might be a hesitation to talk about a taboo topic like this at times in our community. So we have an outreach through YouTube, and you can see that through our YouTube channel. Now going to I'm so glad that we have Sister Anisa, who actually I've known even before I started this work as a huge power of good in our communities, and I think I think Sister Anisa reached out to me initially when I started as well, and I remember her saying when we started in Strong Support in 2019, and it's people like her who gave me courage, because when I started this, I wasn't really sure like how is the Muslim community going to understand this? It's it's a bit of a taboo. And I'm so grateful that she finally has time. I know she had we tried to bring her earlier, but life happens, and now Alhamdulillah she's here. Um, for those of you who don't know, I'm just going to introduce Sister Anisa earned her master's degree in community counseling from the University of Scranton in 2012. And I'm sorry if you can hear my children, but that is part of the parenting webinar from the University of Scranton in 2012 with a bachelor's in psychology from Salisbury University in 2008. She's a faith-based mental health professional and national certified counselor. I've seen her in countless Islamic events, and mashallah, she, kind of integrates faith into her work and weaves that in really, really well. She's worked as a clinical therapist at various campus counseling centers. She's also been the coordinator for Stand for You suicide prevention program at Salisbury University Counseling Center, and has later also worked as a crisis counselor for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Currently, she owns her own private practice where she provides virtual faith-based counseling and consultations, as well as I mentioned, she's a national speaker and community leader who provides safe spaces for Muslim youth and adults to discuss their own mental health needs while building confidence in their faith and respective identities. And obviously, we're talking about identities today, and it'll be really good to touch on that. She's a native of Eastern Shore of Maryland. Anisa resides in Dearborn, Michigan. Shout out to Dearborn, Michigan, the 313, the 313 crew, with her husband of over 15 years and her two children. And in her free time, she enjoys yoga, Islamic meditation, swimming, and very British, just a very British statement here, and a good book with a couple. So, as well, um, go ahead, Sister Anisa. I think you want to say something.
No, I just wanted to thank you so much for your kind introduction. And yeah, subhanAllah. I was just wanted to say I was very touched by your story and seeing how you've evolved and transformed your work. MashaAllah, your mission really aligns with what we need right now in the world. So I thank you so much for your generous introduction. And I'm just so proud of um, all the work that you do, MashaAllah, and so honored to be here.
No, I think absolutely there's like a calling in our community for a lot of us to do this work. And, one of the things that one of the reasons we had the webinar as mentally strong parenting was I looked at Sister Nita's doing. Right? So, like we focus on sexuality and gender, and we've kind of found that niche within the Muslim community. I think there's a niche which talks about that difficult age between 9 to 15 when children are going through puberty, they're going through change, they're going through a lot of difficulty. And we don't actually have a lot for that audience. Like we have our normal Ramadan, Muharram, you'll have all of these programs, but you won't have programs which are um, for children. And, these are very critical uh, ages where children are going through a variety of emotions. So I've just put, I think she does these monthly, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
and on a Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And you can just see some of the themes here in terms of channeling empathy for kids who are sensitive, anger management, and really, kind of how to for that age group, how to gain tools for the parents so that you can help them experience and as well as regulate those emotions and challenging moments, as we say in parenting. Um, as she also, as I introduced, she really likes meditation. So I think one of the things which I saw myself, and I thought this was really, really nice. It's on her, go ahead on her YouTube channel. She did a really good guided meditation for Palestine. And even at us, I think the impact of what we're experiencing across the world in terms of injustice, and it comes up in our client sessions where people talk about Palestine, people talk about what's happening here, and we can't ignore it. And us as strong support definitely, we were very much attuned to what we were hearing in our circles, and we're kind of, as soon as this disturbance kind of started, it has had that mental health effect on so many of us. So I thought this was really, really nice of a piece for a guided meditation. And it's have a listen to it. It's only 6 minutes long. It's really, really nice. If you do want to contact Sister Anisa, then you can do so on her website, anisadiab.com here. And you can, book the one-to-one sessions. Like I said, she's a professional mental health certified counselor. And today we're kind of uh, when uh, I just wanted her on, and I was kind of saying, Sister Anissa, come on. And she's like, what do we talk about? And I was like, actually, you do a lot of great work with kids and your workshops. And I know that I have parents who come in, and we often talk about parenting and so on. And that's kind of why we came in. And I said, it's interesting as a counselor as to you don't know what populations you're gonna hit, right? You do your training and you think you're going to do something, but you don't quite know what uh, where God's going to lead you in the work and who you're going to be interacting with. I know I certainly did not have parents as a population when I started the work. I was like, oh, I need to help people like me who are struggling. And then I realized, oh, there's the individual, but there's a whole set of things around the individual, and there's a whole population. Like we had spouses who were affected by what was happening. We had parents who were affected by what was happening. Uh, it was they're like these hidden populations when you start and do this work. And the work that we do in sexuality and gender is only part of a microcosm of the bigger issues which are in our society in terms of shame, in terms of not being able to come forward, and also lack of resources for parents in terms of who are navigating this in terms of identity exploration and so on, you know. But before we jump in, I want, and I do this with a lot of counselors, so Forgive me for the off-the-cuff question, but I always ask people what brought them into counseling. What was it that, kind of said, no, I'm gonna do my degree. I'm gonna go down this route. I'm gonna listen to people and just curious to see what piqued your interest for this career and how it all started.
Thank you for asking that. I don't think anyone's really asked me that question before, to be honest, in a webinar or any event I've gone to. And, I was always told as a child that I was too sensitive and that I was too feeling and I was too emotional. And I think, growing up, my mom was a convert to Islam, my dad was Arab, but growing up, you're kind of taught you should go into the sciences, you should go into something medical. And so I
Uh-huh.
learned to sort of stuff those emotions down and kind of be very methodical and logical and like, okay, I'm going to go into the sciences, I'm going to go into medicine. And then all along the way, it was just so interesting. I kept meeting people that I really resonated with. One of them was my career services counselor in
Mhm.
university because I had a crisis at one moment where I said, this really doesn't align with what I want to do. I enjoy biology, but I could tell this wasn't where my heart was at. This wasn't what Allah was calling me to do.
Mm.
And that whole process of meeting with a career services counselor and going through the counseling sessions, everything that populated in those tests, there's a test that you take called the SDS, the self-directed search. And so it gives you all the careers based on your interests, your passions, and what you're good at. And then everything that was coming up was counselor, social worker, therapist,
Wow.
psychiatrist. Everything was in the helping profession. And for anybody who has like a highly sensitive child, that is a sign of emotional intelligence. It is a sign that that person should probably be in some sort of helping profession. And being a doctor is a helping profession in a
Yeah.
sense. But I think, it takes certain types of people, mashallah, like yourself, who are deeply aware, and I always was having conversations with myself as a young child. There was just this heightened awareness that I had that there was more to life than the mundane. And I remember talking to Allah as early as 5 years old every night, and kind of he was my first therapist, right? Allah is your first therapist. And then as I grew older, I realized I wish I had had somebody when I was younger to help me navigate some challenges. I felt like I had to fall down in order to learn. And how nice would it be to be able to share some of my wisdom or what I've learned and the coping strategies that a lot of it was trial and error right before even going into psychology and getting a master's in counseling, but to be able to help youth who are struggling in that and to help not only prevent but help them feel seen in their struggle. Like a lot of kids go through bullying and they think something's wrong with them, that they're being bullied. Whereas a lot of times it is the nice, the kind, emotionally intelligent kids that get targeted the most. And I think about Imam Ali alayhi salam, like he was bullied so much just because he was so good. People couldn't compete with that goodness. So I tell kids all the time now, it's like this is a normal part of childhood. A lot of you are going to experience this, especially if you are such a good person. And it's all of this, this is all confidence building. And this is Allah giving you an opportunity to learn to stand up for yourself and to set boundaries. So very long-winded answer, but yeah, my
No.
goal is to kind of be what I didn't have for myself growing up. And I think for parents too, they need support. We're figuring things out for the first time too. You've never, if you, this is the first time you've had a 5 year old or the first time you've had a teenager, you're learning as you go along. And I think we could all use that support as well, even as adults.
I so resonate with what you're saying. I remember distinctly being in class, and I had like my best friend in class, and the teacher said, "You need to get up, and the person who's next to you, you need to use a word to describe who they are." I think they were in English class or something. My best friend, he got up, and when he used a word for me, the word that he used was sensitive.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh my God. And I was like, yes, I am emotionally sensitive, but I can't believe he stood up and the word that he used was sensitive. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, he's shamed me, like in front of the class that
Yes.
I'm sensitive. And I still remember that moment to this day. And we know that the population that we work with, especially one of the key characteristics of people who have same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria is emotional sensitivity, that they're
Mhm.
a lot more like you said, empathically aware, and they're reading between the lines, and they might not be communicating that to you. They might be good people pleasers and really obedient children, and you would never think it, but actually, um, like the prophetic narration that says seven, the first seven, they should be king, and if they're not king, if they're slaves, then there's something that's going wrong there because they're trying to win that love because they're people pleasing and so on because they're emotionally sensitive and they just want your love so badly. And yeah, and I love what you said about emotional sensitivity then being uh, the the toolkit for you to say, oh, I fit in great as a therapist. And that's what I tell a lot of our men who come to us, or, kind of saying, if you have that emotional sensitivity, then a lot of people want that emotional sensitivity in a man, right? They want that in helping professions, and I don't want like a male nurse who's just going to stab me and put something on me, right? I want empathy, or as a counselor or as a therapist, and how you mentioned Imam Ali, like Imam Ali, a warrior in the battlefield, but one of the most meekest, softest persons in his supplications, right? And you have this huge uh, range of what we mean to be human, right? So wow, thank you for that, and thank you sharing. And I can see how the sensitivity then, how your experience of that then plays into your work. I presume in the workshops that you do, to say, oh, that sensitive child that you're getting, it's probably someone like me. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I hope as if you have a child like that as a parent, I want you to see it as a gift. Like this is something to, I mean, it can definitely be frustrating at times because they're deeply feeling and might not know what to do with those feelings. But then that's your test from Allah to help them harness that gift and to channel it in a way that's going to hopefully make a difference and an impact in society. But sometimes it's hard for parents if they're not highly sensitive in that way. It definitely becomes a matter of, okay, well, how do I get the support now, or how do I do some research on this so that I can best support my child? But thank you so much for sharing your story as well. I know we haven't even gotten into the questions yet, and we're already having a really great conversation, mashallah. So thank you.
Mashallah. No, I think and what I wanted to cover, so there's three themes, inshallah, we'll cover today. And these are themes that come up constantly for us in terms of impact of social media, impact on, the like topics of sexuality and gender. And I
Mhm.
think what we're seeing now, which we didn't have when we were growing, was the the TikTok, the Instagram, the Reels, the um 30-second like thirst traps, even for children, right? Which are stealing their attention, and the skewed kind of world which is being presented in terms of body image, in terms of what does masculinity or femininity mean, and the constant comparison, I think, right? So how do we distinguish a, if my child, and I know this question is probably more towards children who are younger. I would say maybe the ages that you're seeing, 9 to 15.
Mhm.
How do we distinguish between healthy identity exploration, right? Okay, oh, this is a boy, I'm following my footballer that I really
Mhm.
like, or I'm following this. celebrity that I really like, right? And the comparison trap which just comes in and then feels, I think we all had a celebrity, or even if it wasn't celebrity, or if we were even younger, I know I had Hulk or something like that that I wanted to be when, so you always have that, oh, I want to be that. Um, but how do we know as parents what's healthy identity exploration, where they're saying, oh, boys do this, girls do this, and which is Islamic in a sense, where, they're
Mhm.
kind of seeing the differences, but where they are starting to compare and they're copying, or they're completely emulating what's happening there. And I think as a parent, it's really, really difficult to see um, uh, how much of is that, especially for um, us living in the West, where we know that the identity that we have in our homes is very different to the identity as soon as you go outside the home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. This is a great question. And there is a level of healthy identity exploration that we have to allow for with our children. We have to, if they're interested in sports, then they're going online and they're looking at these sports stats. Or if you have a child who's very artistic and they want to go online and they want to watch YouTube videos about how to access some drawing techniques, I think that online spaces like that can be very useful in reinforcing the passions or interests that you might have. And then in the high school years and emerging adulthood, it can also be an amazing space to acquire certain life skills or to develop deepen an understanding of what their career interests might be. As you reach to the 18, 19, early college years, maybe you're going to use that space to help network or find a spouse. So I think that this space can really enhance our sense of identity. My issue is, especially with the 9 to 15 cohort, the issue that you come across is not the allowing for this, using the digital space to help with that identity exploration. It's the unsupervised
Mhm.
access that I have an issue with. And um, with the right guidance and making sure these devices are in a shared space, I think it's incredibly useful. Where I think we can go wrong is when the child has complete access to these devices, especially in bedrooms, overnight, closed
Mm.
doors. That's where it starts to become really challenging. And the other thing we have to keep in mind is when we are in online spaces, you mentioned the comparison trap. So the comparison trap is really when we're measuring our self-worth against somebody else, okay? Which in Islam and also psychologically, we want to teach our children to have mentors to look up to have, obviously with our Anbiya and the Ahlul Bayt, we look to them as mentors. But when it becomes shaming or self-deprecating, this is when it becomes problematic. And so when we're comparing ourselves to what we see online, and then that is creating low self-esteem, because really what we're doing is it's a no-win solution. When we're doing that, it's a no-win situation. We fall into this trap most of the time, even as adults. Like I'm working not just with children who struggle with this, but with adults. A lot of times on social media, right, you see these perfectly curated filtered reels, and then you compare yourself. Well, why isn't my life like that? Why am I not going on that wonderful cruise? My husband never takes me anywhere. Oh, look at them, they're doing a date night. It's just human nature that whatever we see, we kind of turn inwards and compare it to ourselves. But we have to teach our children and even model this as adults that, we just need to focus on comparing ourselves to ourselves and trying to be better than we were last week, trying to be better than we were the month before, and teaching our children that there is a polarization of ideas here that we need to be mindful of. So if you see your child getting into a lot of black and white thinking about situations, or sometimes there's these gender stereotypes that come up, like girls are not as good at math and science as boys are. Well, where did you get that from? Approach it with curiosity. They might have come across something online, a video that kind of reinforced that idea. So the problem with the online space is there has to be a heavy level of supervision, ongoing conversation about what they're accessing, and just know how about when they do make these kinds of comparisons, like how do we bring it back to their fitra and their internal worth and helping them enhance that rather than outsourcing their validation to complete strangers.
Yeah, and I love that what you said there is that it's not don't give it to them, like at all, because I grew up and, at that time it was television, right? And our parents
Mhm.
would say that don't watch TV and like don't watch too much. And at that time we have to wait for the program, right? We would have to wait until that program comes, or the cartoons would only come after certain time and you would have to wait and you would have to see it. And now, as you say, it's unlimited. It's like you can put it on at any time, and if you're not supervising them, then you're kind of just teaching them complete freedom, and and how do you set those um, digital boundaries, or like what's the mentally strong way that you're setting those boundaries for those children uh, without triggering a total shutdown for them in terms of communication, right? Because a lot of times it's like, what, you failed your test? Like the teacher said, what? Oh, you're grounded, or you're not going to be on the digital tablet for like weeks, right? And
Mhm.
then eventually the parent caves in because the child just asks so much time. So then the child knows that, oh, it's a bargaining game, and if I shout
Mhm.
enough, and I find, I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I find I have to cave in at times because like if I'm doing this webinar now, and if if I've not got childcare, then I have to cave in, right? So um, yeah, so I really liked your response because it was in black and white. But yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, so and you made a really good point that a lot of times we sometimes need to use these devices just to get by like a little bit if we've got something that's time sensitive. I don't believe in just no technology at all. And some mindless entertainment. I think our kids need that sometimes, just like we need that as adults to sit down and deflate on the couch or watch a movie. But it's all about balance. It's all about balance at the end of the day. So I think what's important is, and I'm so glad you're asking this question. And honestly, I think this is the question that has to be on every parent's mind right now because I'm deeply concerned about this. I'm deeply concerned because even though online activity is not inherently harmful, there is a lack of supervision that I'm seeing happening. And the minute you hand your child a smartphone, it is like putting your child in Central Park in New York City unattended.
Mm,
Okay, so with that, if you choose to do that, there comes a lot of responsibility and ongoing conversations. So I know parents who they choose to do that, and again, I'm of the camp of I believe that smartphones and these devices where there is just unsupervised access and all this risk, I don't believe that it's needed at 9 years old, at 10 years old, at 11 years old. Do I know parents who are giving their children at that age smartphones? Yes. But I'm going to tell you, even with parental controls and apps, they find a way to bypass that.
mm,
So I have parents where I'll say, if you're going to do that, you have to have a contract, a device contract, and that device has to come with conditions. And this is whether it's a smartphone or an iPad. And the condition is this is not your phone, this is not your device, it's mine. I'm allowing you access to it, but I have the right to pick it up at any point and check what's happening and what's going on. And if you want to explore what the contract devices look like online, there's a lot of great websites that have templates that you can edit and sort of add your own conditions on there. But anytime a child has a device, it's conditional. It's a conditional relationship, and the child has to understand there's no privacy. You know, just like in the digital world, in the live world that we're living in, you still are supervising their actions and making sure they're safe. The same applies to that world as well. So, you know, the rule of thumb that psychologists say and therapists are saying is really kids don't need these devices unless they're driving, unless somebody is driving, because then they need it for safety reasons, right? They need to call if they need to call 911 if there's an accident. So you're thinking, you know, that's between 16 to 18 years old, although many parents are pushing that more towards 18 with the driving age. Just because that prefrontal cortex development isn't as much in place. So I think it's really, you know, we need to, the best way to address this is not when they're 16, 17 years old and you see that they're addicted to whatever device they're on. By then, it's very difficult to wean them off. But having said that, it's not too late either. The best time to think about what controls and conditions and boundaries you're going to have in place is when they're young, when they're like 4 or 5, 6 years old, starting to have those conversations with, you know, your spouse to say, this is, we need to start to think about what kind of parameters we're going to be putting in place around technology. So it's addictive. I mean, these things are very addictive by design. Once you give it to them, you're increasing the level of disconnection between parent and child, which is, I mean, when I think about kids who are struggling with anxiety and depression, before I even talk about therapy and medication, I ask about social media consumption. I ask about what's the rhythm in the household. So we need to understand that this is very serious. I mean, I'm working with Muslim parents and their children who are dealing with issues like, you know, they almost met up with a complete stranger at a hotel, sending inappropriate photos of themselves to somebody they don't know online. It's very scary. It's very scary. And so I want to I don't want us to be fear based in our parenting, but I also want us to have very real conversations with our kids about this, that there are going to be conditions in this in using this device. And you know, sometimes if you've ever been on a flight and you're going somewhere, the pilot says, hey, we got to take a detour and we got to go somewhere else because it's not safe to land there.
Mm.
And even if you are in this boat where you have a, you know, 15, 16-year-old who is just very addicted, even then we can still take that detour and say, hey, I just came across this information that this app isn't safe, this whatever you're using isn't safe. We need to take a detour. And so we can do that at any time. But the digital boundaries, I think the best intervention is to start earlier on. And it's not a one time conversation, it is ongoing conversations because children will push the boundaries over and over and over again. That's what they're developmentally designed to do. They're pushing for autonomy. And so even the best families with the best kids and the most religious values, nobody is exempt from these issues. And you know, unfortunately, with the introduction of some of these devices, we've seen suicide rates go up, you know, because a lot of times the bullying isn't just staying in school, it's following them on these private chats that they're setting up that parents don't know about. So we really, if you're giving them this device, it's constant supervision. And the more access they have, the more work it is going to be for you as a parent to keep tabs on what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. And even reflecting on what you're saying, like in terms of harassment and bullying and opening up a world, like you said, where you're letting other people in. And children don't have the capacity to set an internal compass for them, right? Like it's very much, oh, somebody told me. A lot of us,
watching and people gender dysphoria, same-sex attracted, they say, "Oh, Ali, somebody told me I was gay, or somebody told me I
Mhm.
was a girl, and somebody told me this," and it's like, "Oh, that's who I am," right? And at
Mhm.
that time, children are so um, aware about their flaws, aware about things that they're different from other children, right? And the only people who can validate them are is really an authority, and parents come in as an authority where they can validate. I have a lot of cases where where clients say, "I don't remember my dad hugging me. I don't remember my dad," and this is for men, saying, "I don't remember my dad saying I'm handsome," right? And recognizing that even boys need validation for their bodies, right? I think it used to be like, oh, girls are being sexualized. I think men are being sexualized at the moment, right? And there's for both. As much as a girl needs to be told that she's pretty, a boy needs to be told he's handsome. So how can parents help develop that internal compass for children so that they don't rely on likes or viral trends for self-worth?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, I would argue too, I mean, if we look at the Islamic sense of having a fitra,
Mhm.
I really do believe each child does have that growing sense of fitra, and it's there because it's been there since that primordial sense of self, right? When we answered Allah's call and we accepted the covenant before we came into this world, we all have this fitra that's still there. So I think as parents, we want to tap into that and be collaborative in the way that we do that. And we do that through curiosity, having a tone of curiosity and asking open-ended questions. And so when they're dealing with, you can always do this through role playing scenarios. You can do this, and that's one of the things I do in the mentally strong workshops is I'll give them a scenario that's not about them, but then I'll have them kind of work it out. So there's a lot of great card decks you can find online that go through different situations, and then at the dinner table you work it out with your kids. It becomes like a fun sort of game. But I think what's most important that I want to drive home is yes, we have this fitra. It definitely needs guardrails. It's like I think being a child is a little bit like being on a rickety bridge. If you see those movies where it's somebody's going on this rickety bridge and then there's this wall, this water and cliffs and they're this close to falling, right? Kids are always on that rickety bridge, and then the father and the mother, they're the rails that the child needs to hold on to. So if one of the rails isn't firm or fixed, it's a little bit challenging, right? And this is not to say, I know families come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes it is a single mom household or single parent household for whatever reason. I'm not saying that child is going to fall because of that. I myself grew up in a household like that. But I say this all to say that we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with understanding that we are those guardrails and we need to model that self validation so that they don't feel the need to outsource that. So sometimes we don't think about this, but I see moms doing this sometimes or dads doing this. They'll be talking to their guy friends on the phone. And they'll be talking about how they're on this diet and they're not happy about their weight and how they need to lose a few pounds. And I'm looking, and the kid is there with antennas listening to dad's conversation. And and we don't realize when they're four, they don't really pick up on things. But once you start to have a 5-year-old, and I know because my son is 5, my daughter is almost 11, they start to really be curious about adult conversations and they start to internalize some of what you're saying. So we have to be very cognizant, even if we're not speaking to them directly, what kind of messaging could we inadvertently be giving our children that we're acting out in front of their eyes? Even things like just the way we talk about ourselves. Like I'll hear people say, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that." And their child is listening. I'll say, don't talk about my friend like that. You're not stupid. We have even saying seemingly innocent things like that is quite detrimental to them. So we always need to maintain like a strength-based tone and try to not have those sorts of conversations in front of our kids about any kind of deficiencies in ourselves. Here's the thing: when we look at mental strength in children, it's always connected to secure attachment with parents. Yes, sports are great and building up their confidence through team sports or volunteering or academic endeavors and them being able to pat themselves on the back and seeing themselves excel. I mean, that does build confidence. That's icing on the cake. For me, when I think about mental strength, the cake is that parent-child relationship and the connection that they have. And a lot of, if you look at Dr. Gabor Mate's book, Hold On to Your Kids, this is what he really emphasizes in his book. All the research is pointing to, you got all these parents and putting their kids in after school programs and they can barely keep up with all these sports and they're so burnt out and exhausted. Whereas what the child really needs is not all these fillers. They need that quality time to feel seen, heard, respected, valued by their parent, and not just time as a family. They also
Mhm.
need one-on-one time with that parent to really feel seen and heard and to be able to work through with some of these challenging things that are going on behind the scenes, maybe the parents have no idea about. Um, so I hope that answers, inshallah, your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you touched on some great points there on like we have the Quranic verse which says, "Oh, make me an imam, Rabbi jalni lil muttaqina imama," and we have that for parent. That's the dua we make for children, right? For it's the
Mhm.
one who's recommended, and it says it's basically saying whatever you do, your children are gonna copy, right?
Mhm.
And when we were talking about phones, like if I'm eating, I'm not going to be using my phone because,
Yeah.
like things like that phone to the side where you're eating while we're having these family, like when you're having lunch with them and kind of have this kind of, because obviously they're copying you and they're seeing, oh, what is that saying on the phone? What is that seeing on the phone? And
Yeah.
and they're picking this up and uh, I love what you hinted about being a friend to your child, right? So if I spend even 30 minutes every day with them, just and life is busy, but you can spend 15, 30 minutes every day with your child. I know life is busy. I know I'm busy. I've got two jobs and, kind of, but I know that I need that quality time with them because if they don't attach to me at this age, if I'm not their best friend at this age, then who else is going to become that person
Mhm.
for them at
Mhm.
some point? Or in our communities, if the upbringing is delegated to the mother and the father is not there, which we see an epidemic in our communities, then it's kind of um, a child needs both, and I think especially well, they need their same-sex parent, right, to be kind of
Mhm.
there so that they can um, have that special bond with them and they need
Mhm.
obviously the opposite sex parent as well. But
Mhm.
I think um, the lack of fatherhood or the lack of that presence is something that we encounter a lot in our work um, for both females and males, where that um, uh, head of the house isn't giving that attention, and you're craving for that attention in a sense later down. So on this topic of sexuality and gender, um, uh, what are some of the red flags that might come up when you think that a child is exploring gender or sexuality um, and is being negatively influenced by those online spaces versus authentic self-discovery? Like, I know you said that uh, it needs to be a space that is supervised, right? So,
Hmm.
what would be some of the red flags that come up if you're supervising them and you're seeing that they're being negatively influenced by, um, kind of by these teams, by maybe terminology that they're using? I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, and I just want to say too, the thing is, even though we do our best to supervise, it's hard to 100% of the time supervise.
yeah,
I worked with a parent once, and she told me, look, like my daughter was on the laptop, it was in the kitchen, on the table, I'm cooking, and had no idea she was having a conversation with this
subhanAllah.
other person who was an adult, and this went on for years. So I don't want anybody to feel shame as a parent if they've experienced a moment where their child has come across something inappropriate or have had an encounter that didn't, it's like as parents, we're doing our best, but we can't 100% of the time have eyes. So it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of effort to put in the controls, to have the continued conversations with your kids, but also to recognize that despite our best efforts, Shaitan is the open enemy and is always going to be there waiting. And when I talk about things like pornography and prevention of that, I always say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they come across it. And so that's why we have to be very preventative and have those conversations with them beforehand about what's acceptable and what isn't. And the rest is kind of up to that child and Allah and doing your best to supervise. But having said that, you have to really, with kids, read between the lines with, because a child isn't going to come up to you and say, hey, I feel like spending all this time online is negatively impacting me and I need to take a break. I think I might have heard that one time in my whole life that a parent told me that, and she gave up the phone and was like, here, take it. But that was like, she was 16, 17 at the time, and going through a lot of mental health issues. So I think she kind of realized that after a lot of boundary setting and effort. But it's rare. It's rare. A kid doesn't usually have that insight to be able to come to parents and say, I need a break for this, but it's going to show in other ways, right? So, you have to pay attention to their body language when they walk into a room. Do they shrink when they walk into a room? Um, if you notice that they are not as confident as they should be, or they're talking about things like details that you're like, how would you know something like that? That's a very, this concept that you're bringing up, it doesn't sound like a normal peer conversation to have. Yeah, that's a sign to look through their history and then to see what they're watching online. And it does happen. So if they're withdrawing or they're mentioning things that are very black and white in thinking, again, we talked about earlier some of the dangers of the digital room world is that you're dealing with this algorithm. That algorithm is then reinforcing the same thing that they're watching over and over and over, and it becomes this dark hole where now they started here, but now they're ending in a completely other place. So what we need to do is make sure this echo chamber isn't happening, and so that can only happen with balance time in this space. And really, I know some of the recommendations talk about connecting, being in the digital realm more to maybe earning it through chores, earning it through doing other things first. And I think that's not a bad idea to allow that. And that way you can be a little bit more stringent of like, okay, because you worked on your science fair project this weekend, I'm going to give you like an hour and a half online. So I think that's healthy, right? To have that model of, okay, you get to earn some of this leisure time now, after doing what's urgent and what's important. But what we want is obviously to balance all these ideas that they're coming across, because the algorithm is going to reinforce. I had a client who they felt very lonely, so they were going on chat GPT, but it was like character AI. And that character was just the whole time reinforcing everything they were thinking. And that's not healthy, right? That's the dangers we see some of these people accessing therapy and as in an AI sense, the danger of that is the over reinforcement of the problem instead of redirecting the problem and having that balance. So we don't want this. So the way that we try to navigate this is we want to put them in safe spaces where there's diverse ideas and there's diverse opinions and diverse people that hopefully reinforce some of our parental values in real time. While at the same time, we have to acknowledge as parents, even if we put them in an Islamic school environment, even if we put them in an Islamic retreat area, like, that there's still going to be situations and challenges that they will encounter that are going to go against their values and your values as parents. But what we hope, and this is again what is most instrumental, is that parent connectedness and that secure attachment, that inshallah will be instrumental in that 10% of the time where they get exposed to a Muslim peer who's telling them that they should, I don't know, take off their hijab, or kind of telling them to go against certain values. I had a parent who told me their child got exposed to pornography at the masjid on a
Oh,
phone. So this one kid had access to a smartphone, was showing everybody else. So I say this to say that no, there's no space that's 100% safe all the time, right? I mean, we try to put our kids in those spaces as much as possible. But what we want to do again, we want to go back to building on that parent connectedness and those open conversations, because the antidote for any of this kind of what we call the compare and despair trap, this cognitive distortion of compare and despair. The antidote for that is connection to the parent and having that strong connection with parent and child. And so with my kids, it might not be every day we have 30 minutes. I know we're super busy, but one thing that we really emphasized as our family started to notice that there were like certain challenges around prayer time and kind of scheduling our days. We pray together as a family,
mhm,
and all of us do Jama'at together as much as possible for every single prayer that we do, starting from Fajr. And I feel like that's an innate safe space now that you
mhm,
create, that Allah has designed, where we use that time to talk about things that are coming up in the day or to address issues that we're seeing happening as well. So after prayer, we'll do a check-in, and we'll try to kind of have those open conversations. And I think so kids really can open up more with you, and that's a really opportune time to build connection. The other time too, if we don't have a whole 30 minutes in the day, is even just 10 minutes before bed. Kids open up a lot right before bed. There's a
mhm.
part of them, it's like their whole subconscious comes out, and we're the most exhausted as parents by that point. So that's kind of like our greatest test, is just to hold off a little bit on the bedtime, to just do a check-in. And sometimes it's just sitting on the edge of their bed for a little bit, and oh, what are you drawing there? That looks nice. I like that. There's really nice parent-child journals that you can do together as well, that I know my daughter really responds well to that. So I'll do a page and answer a question, and then she'll do a page and answer a question. And then she'll be like, Mom, we started with this question and now we talked about all these other things. So there's so many tools we have at our disposal to try to build that connectedness. And inshallah, that's how you really get the buy-in. A lot of the time you get more cooperation when you make those emotional deposits with your child, and label that time. Like if you are going to do once a month kind of one-on-one date with your child, say like, let's go do some special time or buddy time, call it something so that
Mhm.
they know you're making that extra effort to really want them to have that space to feel seen and heard and understood and more connected to you.
Wow, there's so much good practical advice that you've given there, and I love what you said. The antidote is connection, and it always
Mhm.
is that whatever, as the chronic verse said when we started, whatever that comes to you, patience at whatever comes to you, that whatever has come to you, there's meaning, and if they know that, they've got a parent that is willing to listen. And a lot of times in themes of sexuality and gender, it's not the issue. It's that the child is more worried about how is the parent going to react rather than
Yeah.
the issue itself, right? Um, and yeah, and I think that um, it's a work of a lifetime to maintain. Like we have the concept of silat raham, right? Which
Mhm.
essentially is exactly that, building connections, making sure that connection is in there, rather than what a lot of parents think is I'm responsible for the actions of my child. No, that is not true. Even the prophet could not be responsible for what they were doing, and God keeps telling him in the Quran, why are you so worried? You're not a manager over them, right?
Mhm.
And it's that concept of um, the power that, especially mother son, which Allah compares His love to, right? And that bond is so important. And um, uh, yeah, just everything that you said, the bedtime stories, I think there's a lot of wisdom, right, in the past, thinking of bedtime stories and being there, and the again, our elders having the Jama prayer together, and
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can learn from our elders, and how these things, and maybe they've not um, we're not carrying those things as much, because life has just become too busy, or we're not um, having lunch as a family, and I think those small things which can be done regularly, even in Islam, we have this concept, right? The small things that are done
Yes.
regularly are uh, much more efficient than the big thing that you're kind of gonna do once in a while.
Yes, and I always say so many interventions, so little time. Like even
Yeah,
for myself, like I can't pull out all the tools I know in a day, even though I want to. So I think as parents, we have to give ourselves grace and compassion and recognize the systems, family systems have changed, right? With the Industrial Revolution, with capitalism, a lot of parents are both working. The rhythms of the home are not what they used to be. But I really do believe children are meant to slow us down. And that's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
yeah,
I think they're meant to slow us down and remind us of our higher purpose. And we have a lot to learn from them. We have a lot to learn from them in these moments. So, alhamdulillah, it is a blessing to slow down at night. And my friend was saying to me the other day, she's like, if you're not completely exhausted by the end of the day as a parent, there's something you're doing wrong. So that's the biggest test, right? You're done you're putting your kid to sleep, you're just done. You want your you time. But if you can just stretch it out 10 minutes, put your phone away, stretch it out 10 minutes, see what comes up. You might really uncover, unearth something that was really bothering them that you had no idea that they were going through. But we have to do that detective work because they're not going to come out and say what they're going through point blank most of the time. So,
absolutely. Such beautiful practical advice. So what I want to do now is, we've got a few minutes, and I know this is the part I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for. So this is the Q&A part. You will have at the bottom of your screen a Q&A icon where you can ask anonymously. Um, and I know some of you have already started. So you can use the anonymous if you don't want, uh, and use that. Also, you can speak, but just realize that your name will be shared, and this is live and this is recorded. So if you prefer, you can type the question in. We've already got the first question, which has come in. Um, and I know this because a lot of the parents I deal with have adult children. So the question is saying how to connect with more adult children, to someone who's 22, and we don't have that bedtime connection with him anymore.
subhanAllah, you know, just when you think you've mastered all the tools. Allah gives you a new season of life with your child where you have to learn a new set of tools. And that's why, subhanAllah, in this dunya, we're always in a state of discomfort because once you learn one way, your child is in a different season. So in this season of life, you're really befriending your child a lot more. It's a lot more of a collaborative relationship. We're still going to maintain curiosity. We're still going to ask open-ended questions, but we want to make sure that we're careful with our active listening, especially at this age. They're probably a lot more emotionally intelligent and intuitive. And I'm just going to say this generation is kind of sensitive to tone a little bit more than previous generations. And they're sensitive to someone just jumping in and giving feedback right away or telling them what to do. This generation, they want to be heard and seen, and they're going to their friends and talking about their therapy appointments and what their therapist just told them. So there's no stigma with this age cohort as much as we've seen previously when it comes to mental health and talking about those issues. One thing that I think is important is just to say, hey, I really miss you. Like I don't know what this particular attendee is going through, but it seems like you might feel disconnected, right? So just to use I statements and say, I miss you. I've been feeling disconnected with you over the past couple of weeks. I'd love an opportunity to reconnect. What would that look like for you? Right? Just ask that open-ended question, use that I statements. You don't want to like guilt trip them. Oh my, you don't love me anymore. You're not honoring your relationship with your mom. Because they're not going to want to spend time with you if they think you're just going to complain the whole time you're seeing them. So just like kind of put the ball in their court and see what they say. And they might say something like, I've been thinking of that too. And I really I want to spend more time with you as well. Like, what if we kind of meet up after classes every Friday after Jama, go for Jama prayer together, and then we can meet up for dinner every week and just have that time be for us. And I really, really love card decks. I talked a little bit about them earlier, but there is a company, feel free to explore online. There are a lot of faith-based card decks coming out now, but there is one more secular card deck that I like. It's on a website called The Skin Deep. I believe it's theskindeep.com. There are card decks for husband and wife, parent, child. There's one on family healing as well. But it just like what I like about it is it's sort of like a game where you pull a card out and then you'll ask the child the question on the card, and then they ask the same question. So the question might be something like, what do you feel like is my biggest strength as a parent? What is something you think we need to work on in our relationship? What is the best memory that you and I have had together? I mean, what a lovely conversation is about to unfold here. So instead of just sitting there and staring at each other, having your ice cream or whatever when you're meeting up, now we're building empathy and we're building understanding and we're building connection through this deck. And there's no ulterior motives that this child is thinking, why is she asking me that, right? So I would recommend start there. Just have a conversation, express how you're feeling because they can't read your mind, you can't read their minds, and then see if you can build that empathy and make those opportunities that you do get together productive, inshallah. Hope that helps.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Um, Another parent saying some of the red flags you mentioned, I have noticed with my 12-year-old daughter. A couple of days ago, I went into a room and she looked like a deer caught in headlights. So, how do you start that conversation that I want to check her browsing history? There is no way she will just hand over her phone. How can I get her to trust me to look at her phone? She will just tell me that's a controlling thing to do and that I'm infringing on her privacy.
Mhm. So remember I talked earlier about sometimes the pilot is going towards a certain destination and then they realize, whoa, I need to reroute the trajectory that I'm going on. So this is one of those situations where we have to reroute. And so the conversation is going to look like, I've noticed you haven't, seen like yourself lately. Is everything okay? So first of all, I would just check in with her, use those I statements. Um, And she might be like, no, what, why are you asking that? Right. And everything's fine. She might be, because a lot of times when you ask that question, you might get anger or irritation as a response. And just know that that doesn't mean you should walk away. That could be a sign that you're maybe hitting a chord with an issue or she's deflecting. So just sit with her a little bit and say, well, I've noticed sometimes you seem a little checked out. I've noticed sort of seem like a deer in the headlights. Like, I love you and I'm always here for you, whatever it is that you're going through. I want you to know you can always talk to me. Um, she seems like, I mean, if she's like almost dissociating a little bit or zoning out, that could be a coping mechanism. Like she might be overstimulated by something she's viewing online, or something could be happening at school. We have to do detective work here, and see what's happening. And maybe you have to start a little bit by meeting her where her interests are at. So if she's reading a really good book, or maybe you're not interested in something she's interested in, but just for the sake of kind of easing into this conversation, connecting with that interest so that you can have that deeper conversation. But there does need to be a conversation about how, you know, me as a parent, I'm still learning how to set digital boundaries. Growing up, we didn't have all these devices, we didn't have all these smartphones. And I'm still learning as a parent how to best protect you all. And I've realized at this point, we need to change the way that we are um, engaging with the phone. Okay. And moving forward, we need to start to develop some conditions in place for your phone usage. Because after what I'm reading, after the research I've been doing on this, I've recognized now that we need to make some healthier choices. And I would also bring it to you that I also would like to start to make some healthier choices too, and not be on my phone as much. Or if I am going to jump on my phone at the dinner table, I'm going to let you know that it's something urgent, and then we'll get back to our conversation. So I think making this collaborative is going to be key. And I would say we have to be careful about this sometimes. And I don't know what the nature is of what your daughter is going through, but I have had situations where a parent will come to me and there's a 16-year-old male who's taller than the parent, right? And you're telling this kid now to completely go cold turkey off it. We don't want to do that either. Okay. We don't want to completely disrupt, go from being 100% engaged to not at all. Okay. So if you are finding that she's really uncooperative and it's maybe to a point where she might threaten to harm herself or might threaten to harm you. It's happened. I had one client of mine went and choked his father because the father confiscated his Xbox. So don't put yourself in danger, please. If you need to work with a therapist to help you and gently wean her off, do that. But we have to kind of let her know that sometimes parenting is a journey, and we have to make better decisions with what we know now. And what we know now, according to the research, is that we have to be more careful in these spaces. So, um, and then is it okay if I jump to the card deck question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's two questions which are the same.
Okay.
Um, People very
Yes.
interested on the website that you mentioned.
Yes. Let me grab that website real quick. I think it's called skindeep.com. Just double check. I can type it in the chat box too. Okay, I found it. All right, I'll type it in the chat box. Okay, so this should be it, inshallah. Here.
And I like the concept of the cards, right? Because um it's whether the child is, and I guess you can get the adult ones, whether the child is young or adult, or even for our spouses, right? As
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, and definitely there's something for every age on there. And I will often use that as like if a husband and spouse are having trouble building empathy and understanding and connection, I will tell them sometimes, depending on where they're at in their journey, start with these cards, and see if you can increase some of that understanding and deepen the interaction a little bit more. And it just takes a lot of pressure off of each person to feel like there's, again, some ulterior motive in asking that particular question.
And I know that, as you mentioned as well, that I think I saw this is some Muslim Islamic uh, kind of cards and stuff as well that
Mhm.
have started as well.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes, there is a marriage card deck. I think it's called
mhm,
qalb to qalb, I think, heart to heart in Arabic, qalb to qalb. So if you go on Instagram, you are starting to see these faith-based decks creep up. Um, and there's another one more. It's interesting. Like there's some for even the self, like just pulling a card for yourself to ask yourself a question, and that can prompt you to start journaling and kind of increase your insight and understanding.
um, would oh, there's another question. Great. Uh, how to reconnect with children about gender identity when they seem so firm about a certain opinion. It is very challenging when they don't open up. Uh, yeah.
This is really hard. It sounds like, for example, this particular child is already very shut down and just doesn't want to engage on that topic anymore. And it
Mhm.
is hard if they don't want to open up. And so I would say in this situation, we always want to keep the door open. We always want to keep the conversation going. And it's okay if there's this elephant in the room and they just don't want to open the door to that elephant, we can still create connection by talking about other things in that child's life. And then maybe this is where we connect them with somebody, like Brother Ali here, and have them do some counseling so that if they don't feel like they can open up to you about certain things, then maybe they can open up to another trusted therapist or someone that can reinforce some of those values they want themselves to internalize. Even then, they may not open up. It's really hard because we can't we can influence others, but we can't control whether or not they choose to change. We can't motivate change in others. We can only kind of plant the seed. So what I love about Islam is always about amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, right? And giving advice. And that's all we can do is advise. At the end of the day, they have their own free will. But as long as you always keep that door open, it makes me sad when I hear of parents who've completely disowned their children. They don't speak to them anymore because of their gender identity concerns. This is un-Islamic. And I've talked to scholars about this in the past. They said this is haram. You cannot just cut your child off. You always have to leave the door open for them. So there's always hope, and you don't have to do it alone. Even if they seem firm, maybe you connect them with another trusted adult who can get them to open up a little bit more. Even as therapists, we can't do therapy with our children, right? I have somebody that works with my child, and alhamdulillah for that. So it's not a failure on your part if they don't open up to you. I want you to have that self compassion for yourself as well, that you're doing your best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's as you said earlier on, that the connection is really, really important. And um, a lot of parents ask, why did my child tell me now? Or why did I
Mhm.
find out now? Why didn't I know a lot earlier? And a lot of the time is that maybe that was the right moment, or maybe that was when they were ready to talk about it. And whatever happens, and I'm reiterating this, what we said before, um, it's not the gravity of the situation, but the gravity that I have uh, my support system, which is my parent, which is going to say, I still got you. You're still my child. I still love you, and I think that um, by natural law, that connection of you being their parent and you being that stabilizer for them in their life is much more heavier than whatever that they're actually struggling through. And
Mhm.
they probably, a lot of the times, these children may not come to you because they've already have a solution in their heads and they're not they're not telling you what that solution is because you might disagree with them on that solution, right? And then
Mhm.
especially for parents who, we have the hadith of the seven, the seven, and the seven, right? And then when they are adults and they're viziers and after age 21, right, they are really an adult and really um your role as a parent with adult children really becomes more of connection based,
Mhm.
where you're still good, I still love you, I've got an open door, whatever it is, I can always speak to you, because usually at that point they're not gonna if they come to you for advice, they'll be very specific in what that advice
Mhm.
is, and they'll keep other things away. But I think what's really important is um, that stability, like we have in Risalat al-Haqooq, we have the right of the father is that he's your root, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's that beautiful metaphor of somebody who grounds me, right? Who just grounds me and says, yeah, I always, like in our cultures, we have the concept, may the shadow of your parents always be on you, right? So it's that protective shadow which they have. And I think that natural law that God has given us, and if we just work on the connection, then that connection is much more important than so if you have a child, and I do work with parents who have kids who identify as LGBTQ, but the communication, we've worked on the communication where the communication is so good between them now, where it's like, oh, I they can talk about things which are happening in their life, and they're like, oh, okay, yes, the parent may not agree with what's happening, but at least they're part and parcel of their lives, right? And I
Right.
think at the end of the day, we have examples. I always use this of, say, the Asiya or Lut's wife, or Prophet Lut alayhi salam, and Prophet Noah's son, where these were excellent parents, right? Or they were excellent spouses, but they were still challenged by somebody, right? So it isn't to say that our the Islamic way is to bring my child into Islam. No, the Islamic way is to show the akhlaq that Islam
Mhm.
shows. So we build that connection. People went to the Prophet not because of one plus one is two, but because what they saw in the akhlaq was so beautiful that they said, because we don't know when our children might change or when the ideology drops. But I always
Yes.
say that they will always remember, like we have that same statement, right? People don't remember what you say, they remember how they felt, right? So if they
Mhm.
always felt that you listened to them, you were there, you were open, then the relationship counts a lot more than the issue which is at hand. Mhm.
Mhm. Very beautifully said. Yeah, there's I love how you talked about the examples of the prophets, that they could see the vices in their children. They could see that they were not making, even their wives, sometimes not making good choices, but still trying to connect with them in other ways and trying to model the akhlaq, right? You never read any hadith about how they were being harsh or anything. And there was always that modeling and being an extension of Allah's rahmah. So, this is just one part of who they are and what they're struggling with. And we want our children to understand that this situation doesn't have to over define you. If you're struggling with these urges or you're struggling with these intrusive thoughts, not even just about gender identity. I had a client one time, she had negative, intrusive thoughts about God, like inappropriate thoughts about God. She couldn't get it out of her head and she was panicking about it. So she was feeding those thoughts that were happening for her. And once we realized, okay, that's just a thought, it doesn't have to reflect who you are. It's you don't have to over identify with it. I think sometimes we just really over identify with one aspect of ourselves rather than looking holistically and taking a helicopter view and saying, hey, this is, there are going to be times where these thoughts come your way. It does not mean that you have to just accept every thought you have. If we have 50 to 70 thoughts every day, 70,000 thoughts every day, if we believed single thing we thought, we would kind of go crazy here. So, we always have to put things through a filter. And I think even when we talk to our children, sometimes I hear parents say things like, I'm so disappointed in you. Like, you're such a disappointment. I can't believe you did that. It's just very shaming.
Mm.
Whereas we can say things a little bit in a kinder, softer way of, I really wasn't expecting that. You know, how it doesn't it shifts the energy in the room, right? I wasn't expecting that. And at the same time, how can we recover from this? Or how do you want to move forward from that? Because these decisions, every decision we make, we can either allow it to over define our identity and who we are, or we can see it as, well, this is one chapter in my story, but it doesn't have to be the whole story of my life. So bringing that balance, I think, as parents and how we choose to speak to our children, we don't want to annihilate their character. We don't want to label them as you're such a bad kid for doing that or entertaining that idea. You're right. Sometimes things are just going to come up at the time that they're ready to share it, maybe because they're trying to do it on their own first, which is not always, they're trying to work through it on their own. It's not a bad thing. I had one client, she, was in middle school and her best friend opened up to her and said, I like you more than just a best friend.
Mm.
And she didn't really have, I mean, she was young. She didn't really know how to set boundaries and she didn't want to hurt her feelings. So she said, okay, I guess I feel the same way too. And then after working together, she realized that, she was thinking about it for a time, but it didn't really reflect her holistic values and her whole approach. And so she just realized that I need to work on setting boundaries with people. I didn't know what to say in that moment. I didn't know what to think about that. And, it was the pandemic, and like a lot of parents were overwhelmed during that time. She was going on Google, like, back in the day, it used to be that kids asked their parents for advice, and now they go to Google for advice. And I know Leonard Sachs talks about this, Dr. Leonard, in his book, The Collapse of Parenting, that Google has now kind of replaced that parent. So this child is going online and it's kind of reinforcing, this decision that she wasn't really on board with to begin with, but felt like she was obligated to move along with because she didn't want to lose her friend. So yeah, sometimes things come up in the right moment and then the parent's able to address it appropriately. And Alhamdulillah, we don't also have to do it alone. I love that you brought up Risalat al-Hukuk because I was reading it the other day, and actually there is the rights of the counselor in there.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I was thinking, wow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to seek help and seek counseling. There's a whole list of what the rights are, and that you should, go to and seek advice from those who are expert. And you should also forgive them if they don't give you the best advice because they're doing their best. And then there's the right of the client, the person seeking consultation. So I just want to say, I think we live in a time where we're so blessed, alhamdulillah, to have people like you, mashallah, and the work that you're doing, that we can connect with multiple faith-based counselors who can be on our team. It's hard to, I mean, sometimes we're in our own echo chamber. We have our own blind spots. It's hard to try to navigate it ourselves. Even if we listen to all the podcasts out there and read all the books, there are just certain blind spots that we can't work through. And sometimes we're triggered by our children. It's got nothing to do with what the child said, but maybe that child is 5 years old. And when you were 5 years old, your parents divorced. And now the things that they're bringing up are bringing up things in your subconscious that you never worked through when you were five. So I just really am a big proponent of getting therapy, not when things are in crisis, but just as a means to grow and awaken your consciousness and awareness and grow closer to Allah. And hopefully, we can look in front of Allah on the day of judgment and say to him, we couldn't control what our children chose to do, but we did our best to do everything possible to guide them and give them good advice and to model that. And at the end of the day, that's all we can control is how we choose to engage and show up.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your kind words. And I think um, even in my own work, I find a lot of solace in knowing that I'm a limited human being, right? So that
Mhm.
I'm limited, and I say that to my clients. I say, you might talk therapy or counseling, coaching is only one intervention, and it might not work. It not might not work for you, but it doesn't mean that you give up. And then there's,
Mhm.
um, for example, there's no right or wrong in sometimes cases to parenting. Like what you said, that a child that couldn't make boundaries with somebody who's saying, "Oh, I really love you. Can we take this further?" Might have grown up from a strict parenting, which said you almost must say yes, right?
Mhm.
And then the child who misbehaves and says no, they're actually meant to say no because they're building their um, individual confidence, right? It's good that
Mhm.
they're saying no because that means that they have their sense of self and they're growing. Okay, this is for me, this isn't for me, right?
Yes.
So and we think it's misbehavior, but it's not. It's them being their individuals, as you pointed out earlier. So I
Yeah.
think that a lot of parents carry a lot of guilt that they didn't do the right thing or they didn't know the right information. But I always tell them that God chose you to tell you at that moment in time, and you kind of want to um, submit that God will not ask you about things that you just did not know. Our God is
Mhm.
merciful, that He will not judge you on things that you don't know. He only judges you on things that you knew, you know. And there's a non-believer who came to me, sorry, a Christian came to me and he said, Ali, you think I'm an infidel? Because all of this Islamic stuff, and he's like, what is kafir? And I said to him, no, I don't. And he says, well, what does infidel mean? I said, well, in Islam, it means kufr means somebody who knows something, yet he's hiding it. That's what
Mhm.
kufr means. It doesn't mean somebody who doesn't believe, someone doesn't know. And he said, and it just changed that, what I kind of told him, just completely changed how he saw it. So we have a Lord which is so merciful that says, well, if you don't know, I'm not gonna judge you, like the person who used to put food out for God, and Musa said, "Why are you putting food for God? He doesn't eat." And then God says, "Don't tell him that's his knowledge of what God is, and he just gives food out because he thinks that's who I eat." And I love his act that he's giving food to this animal. So I think God reaches us where at the level that we are at. And so why don't we reach our children at the level that where they're at and see the world through their eyes, right? And I say this so many times to parents that even if they remain as LGBTQ or they remain in this, God is still forgiving. The forgiveness of Allah is still there, right? It's about meeting them where they are at that moment, seeing the world through their eyes and saying, what is the most loving thing I can do? Which does include nahi and al munkar at times, right? Where we
Yes.
have to kind of guide them and having that um kind of holistic thing. We have a final question because I know we're a little bit over time. Um, would you mind to provide the website that the lecturer has mentioned? I couldn't see where did she wrote it. Many thanks. Um, I'm not actually sure what this question is. We
I
mentioned.
think though she's looking for the website for the card decks. Let me try to type it again. I wonder if she can see it now.
Oh yeah, so it's shop.theskindeep.com.
Or if you
Um,
just Google like, the Skin Deep card deck, it should come up, the whole website. It's called this Skin Deep card decks. Mhm.
yeah, so it's called shop.theskindeep.com,
Mhm.
and it looks like there's a variety of for couples and families and kind of um, uh, friends as well. So yeah, fantastic. Um, any final words, Sister Anisa, before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you. I mean, this was such a fruitful discussion. Alhamdulillah, I really appreciate all the viewers who listened in and asked their questions. And, um, please forgive me for anything, any shortcomings on my end. And again, I really don't want anyone to walk away from this webinar feeling shame or feeling guilt. What Brother Ali was saying, we're learning as we're going along, and it's okay not to know everything. We have to kind of talk to ourselves and say, I'm allowed to be a beginner at this. I'm allowed to be just figuring out how to navigate these situations. I'm allowed to not know everything. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, the one who considers himself all-knowing will surely suffer due to his ignorance. It's one of my favorite quotes, because it's in Nash al-Balagha, because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. I mean, it really, as you become an expert, you realize you're not an expert. Allah is the only expert. So we're just doing our best. And you know what? You might hear some things today and say, wow, I really need to backtrack or reconfigure some of my parenting with my children. There's, I think, a beauty in going to your kids and saying, I'm still figuring things out as a parent. I don't know everything. But one thing I have come across is some of this information, some of these statistics. And my job is to protect you, and my job is to make sure that in front of Allah and on the day of judgment, I can feel proud of the way I raised you guys. And I want to connect more. It's not just about limiting, it's about when you say no to one thing, you're saying yes to something else, right? When we're saying no to more screen time, what we're doing is saying yes to more connection time with your child. And that isn't that great? I mean, yes, we're exhausted at the end of our days. I get it. I've been there many days, but we can still show up and be present as much as possible and do those check-ins. And if we need to, again, to get over kind of this period, this hump of utilizing too much screen time or technology after school, get help for it. You can put them in sports. Again, I don't advocate it for overdoing it, because kids need a break too, but you're not alone in this. And inshallah, we're here to support you too. And if anybody does want to reach out to me or has any questions about this webinar, you can definitely check out my website, anisadiab.com, and I'd be happy to connect there, inshallah. And I know Brother Ali is always available to connect too.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you so much. And there's a question. Yes, this webinar will be on our website, on our YouTube channel. As somebody saying, thank you for your words of wisdom. We only know what we know. Absolutely. And, I think that we have a great faith and a great Lord who kind of um, uh, I always say this, the out of all the names that Allah has, He prefers Rahman Rahim, right? And then it kind of
Mhm.
puts you the mercy that I'm always in need of Allah. We have that dua that says, oh Allah, do not let me rely on myself even for the blinking of an eye, right?
Mhm.
Which kind of says that I'm completely reliant on Allah, and if a musiba comes to me, then it was meant to come for me at that
Mhm.
time, and that knowledge was meant to come. And everybody who's joining here on the, you're doing well done to you. You spend the last hour worrying about parenting, so you're already on the journey, right? And a lot of people come up to me and they say, Ali, have you got it figured out? And I say, I haven't got it figured out. I'm still on my journey. I'm still learning. And I think that is uh, in Islam, the beauty is the jihad. The beauty is not the destination, right? It's that we're always in this state of learning, of discovering, and with a sincerity, with an ikhlas that we're doing it for Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. We're doing it, kind of to uh, be helpful. And as Sister Anisa mentioned, that she experienced something being a sensitive child, and how maybe that was maybe a musiba at that time, but now how that's turned into something which is beautiful. And I sincerely think that all the difficulties that we're experiencing now with our children will eventually, Allah will turn them into something which is beautiful later, you know.
Yes.
So I think
I
it's,
mean,
yeah, it's having that wadar al-akhiratu khayrahu wa abqa, right? Is having that long-term vision rather than that short-term vision of um oh my God, my children's gone astray, you know. So yes, so much that could be said, and so much thank you for your time. As mentioned, if you want to connect the email and the address, reach out to me, or it is on our website. Thank you so much for your time, Sister Anisa. Very, very helpful. And again, thank you for the work that you continue to do. You're hitting a very crucial um, population, which I think a lot of us are ignoring. Especially, you know, I see some centers now during Ramadan or Muharram, they have a kids program or something, which I really, really like, because a lot of our services in the masajid and in our centers are catered to adults and they're not catered to children, and we're missing the next generation. So thank you so much for your work. May Allah continue to bless you and what you're doing. Please keep me in your du'as, and I'll keep you in mine. And thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you for having me. Allah bless you and your family and all the viewers who turned in, inshallah. I pray for all the best in this journey for you.